At my mom's birthday, my dad said, "This was meant to be a nice night, you shouldn't have come." My mom nodded, "Maybe this will teach you something." I looked at my child and said, "Let's head out." We left quietly. That night, I made one call to my grandma. 1 hour later, my dad was calling me nonstop. My dad once told me I ruined a party just by showing up. And the worst part? My mom agreed with him. Right there, in front of everyone, in front of my 4-year-old daughter. But here's the thing they didn't know. I had one phone number saved for emergencies. One person who never, not once in my life, let me down. And that one phone call? It flipped their whole world upside down in less than 60 minutes. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Jolene. Yeah, like the Dolly Parton song. My grandma picked it actually, and honestly, that woman has had better taste in everything than my parents ever did. I'm 31. I live in Dayton, Ohio, and I have a daughter named Brinley. She's 4 and she is my entire universe. Now, I need you to understand something about my family before I get into what happened, because if I just jump straight to the birthday disaster, you're going to think I'm exaggerating. I promise you I am not. Growing up, I was always the kid who wasn't quite enough. My younger brother, Trent, he was the golden child. Trent got straight A's, Trent played baseball, Trent was going to be somebody. And me? I was just Jolene. The quiet one. The one who got pregnant at 26. Which, by the way, is a perfectly normal age to have a baby. But you'd think I committed a federal crime based on how my parents reacted. My dad, Gerald, sat me down and told me I was throwing my life away. My mom, Diane, cried for 3 days straight. 3 days. You'd think someone died. And you know what's funny? Trent got his girlfriend pregnant at 23, and you know what they said? "Oh, how exciting." I'm not making that up. Do you think I'm making that up? As I wish I was. So anyway, fast forward a few years. Brinley's dad, Marcus, wasn't in the picture anymore. That's a whole other story I won't bore you with, and I was raising her on my own. Working full-time at a dental office, paying rent on a little apartment, doing everything right. And I mean everything. I never asked my parents for a dime. Not one. I was so proud of that, actually. Probably too proud, honestly. Now here's where my grandma comes in. Her name is Ruthie. Ruthie Mae Collins. 81 years old, 5'2", and scarier than any person you have ever met when she's angry. But to me, she was the warmest, safest person in the world. She used to call me every Sunday morning. Every single Sunday. Never missed one. And she'd always say the same thing. "Jolene, how's my great-grandbaby, and how are you, in that order?" It always made me laugh. Grandma Ruthie owned a house. Not just any house. A really nice 3-bedroom house in Kettering, just outside Dayton. She'd lived there for 40 years, but when Grandpa Earl passed, she moved into a smaller condo closer to her church. And she gave that house to my parents. Gave it. Free and clear. No mortgage. Do you understand what kind of gift that is? She handed them a house, and all they had to do was pay the property taxes and keep it up. That's it. And my parents? They acted like it was owed to them. Like Grandma Ruthie was just fulfilling some kind of obligation. That always bothered me, but I kept my mouth shut. I was good at that. Too good. So it was October. Diane's birthday. She was turning 58. Trent organized this dinner at a restaurant called Rosario's. Nice Italian place, nothing crazy but definitely not cheap. He invited the whole family. Cousins, aunts, uncles. Even my Aunt Patrice flew in from Louisville, which, trust me, is a big deal because Patrice hates driving and hates flying even more. Now, nobody invited me. Let me say that again. Nobody invited me. I found out about the dinner from my cousin Shayla, who texted me a screenshot of the group chat I wasn't even in. Can you imagine? Your own mother's birthday dinner and you find out through a screenshot. Shayla felt terrible. She said, "Joe, I thought you knew." I'm so sorry. I sat there staring at my phone for a long time. And I had 2 choices. I could stay home, feel sorry for myself and let them win. Or I could show up anyway because that is my mother and I have every right to be there. Which one do you think I chose? Yeah. I put Brinley in her little purple dress, the one with the butterflies, and I drove to Rosario's. When I walked in, I could feel it immediately. You know that feeling when a room shifts? Like the temperature drops 2 degrees? Trent saw me first. He kind of froze with his breadstick halfway to his mouth. My Aunt Patrice smiled and waved, bless her, but everyone else just stared. Diane's face went tight. Gerald put down his fork. I smiled. I said, "Happy birthday, Mom." I even brought a gift. A nice scarf, lavender, because that's her favorite color. I put it on the table and sat down in the empty chair at the end. Brinley climbed up next to me and immediately started coloring on the kids' menu. She was perfectly behaved. She's always perfectly behaved. She gets that from me, honestly, not that my parents would ever admit it. For about 20 minutes things were awkward but fine. Aunt Patrice talked to me about her cat, Biscuit, who apparently has a thyroid problem now. Shayla kept giving me encouraging looks from across the table. I was handling it. I was breathing. I was fine. And then Gerald opened his mouth. He waited until there was a lull in the conversation. He set his napkin down, looked right at me and said, "And I will never forget this as long as I live. This was meant to be a nice night. You shouldn't have come." The table went silent. I looked at him. I looked at Diane, waiting for her to say something. Waiting for her to defend me. And you know what she did? She nodded. Fully. And she said, "Maybe this will teach you something." Teach me something. Teach me what? That my own parents don't want me around? That my daughter and I are an inconvenience? At a birthday dinner at an Italian restaurant in Ohio? I didn't cry. I want you to know that. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flip a table. I looked down at Brinley, who was still coloring, completely unaware, and I said very calmly, "Let's head out, baby." And we left. Quietly. I held her hand through the parking lot, I buckled her into her car seat, and I sat in the driver's seat for a minute, just breathing. And then I made one phone call. I called Grandma Ruthie. I told her everything. Every word. The dinner, the group chat I wasn't in, what Gerald said, what Diane said. And I need you to picture this. Ruthie is 81 years old, she's probably in her bathrobe watching Wheel of Fortune, and she goes completely silent. That silence? That's the dangerous one. When Grandma Ruthie yells, "You're fine." When she goes quiet, someone's life is about to change. She said 4 words, "I'll handle it, baby." 1 hour later, literally 1 hour, my phone started ringing. It was Gerald. I didn't answer. He called again. And again. Then Diane called. Then Trent called, which really surprised me. Then Gerald again. 7 missed calls in 15 minutes. I turned off my phone, gave Brinley a bath, read her goodnight moon and put her to bed. And I slept better than I had in months. Now, I know you're dying to know what Grandma Ruthie said to them. Oh, trust me, I'm going to tell you. Because what happened next changed everything. And honestly, I still can't believe my dad's reaction when he found out what Grandma Ruthie decided. You're not ready for that. I wasn't ready for that. But I'll get to it, I promise. So stay with me. Because this story gets so much wilder. Okay, so where was I? Right. 7 missed calls. Phone off. Brinley sleeping like an angel. Me sleeping like a woman who just unleashed Grandma Ruthie on her own parents. Honestly, best sleep of my life. So the next morning I turn my phone back on and it's chaos. I had 23 missed calls. 23. 14 from Gerald, 6 from Diane, 2 from Trent and 1 from Aunt Patrice. But hers came with a text that just said, "Girl. Call me when you can. Your grandma is wild." And listen, when Patrice uses capital letters, you know something legendary happened. But before I called anyone back, Grandma Ruthie called me first. 7:15 in the morning. She was already up, already had her coffee, already handled business. That woman operates on a schedule that would put a military general to shame. She said, "Good morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep well?" I said, "Yeah, Grandma, I actually did." She said, "Good. Because your parents didn't." Oh, the way I almost dropped my phone. Do you think she was joking? She was not joking. Ruthie Mae Collins does not joke before 8 a.m. So here's what happened. After she hung up with me that night, Grandma Ruthie did not call my dad. She didn't text. She got in her car, at 9:30 at night at 81 years old, and she drove to the house. The house she gave them. She still had a key because, well, it's her house. He walked right in. Now picture this. Gerald and Diane had just gotten home from the birthday dinner. They were probably still in their nice clothes, maybe pouring themselves a glass of wine, feeling real satisfied about how they handled things. And then they hear the front door open and there's Ruthie. In her housecoat. With her purse on her arm. And if you've ever seen a Southern grandma show up unannounced with her purse on her arm, you know that purse is not there for fashion. That purse means business. She sat down at the kitchen table and she said, "Sit. Just sit." 1 word. And they sat. Because what are you going to do, argue with Ruthie? Gerald is 6'1" and he sat down like a kid in the principal's office. And then she laid into them. Grandma told me the whole conversation, and honestly I wish I'd been a fly on that wall. She said, "I gave you this house because I trusted you to build a family in it. Not to tear one apart. You excluded my granddaughter from her own mother's birthday. You humiliated her in front of her child. In front of family. In a public restaurant. And you," she pointed at Diane, "you told your own daughter that being rejected should teach her something. Well, I'm about to teach both of you something." Can you imagine sitting across from Grandma Ruthie while she says that? I get chills just repeating it. Gerald apparently tried to explain. He started with, "Mom, you don't understand the situation." And Ruthie cut him off. "Don't you me, Geraldine. I understand exactly the situation. I understood it when Jolene was 12 and you compared her grades to Trent's at Thanksgiving dinner. I understood it when she was pregnant and you acted like she'd committed a crime. I have been understanding this situation for 20 years, and I am done understanding. 20 years. She'd been watching for 20 years and keeping track. That's the thing about Grandma Ruthie, she notices everything. She just waits for the right moment. And that night was the moment. Now here's where it gets real. She told them they had a choice. They could apologize to me, genuinely, not some half-hearted sorry you feel that way nonsense, and start treating me and Brinley like family. Or there would be consequences. Gerald laughed. He actually laughed. He said, "What consequences, Mom? We're adults." Oh, Gerald. Sweet foolish Gerald. Do you think that was a smart thing to say? Guess it was not. Grandma Ruthie stood up, put her purse back on her arm and said, "You'll find out." And she left. Just walked right back out the door. So the next few days were interesting. I didn't answer any of Gerald's calls. I didn't answer Diane's either. Trent texted me once and said, "What did you tell Grandma?" Like it was my fault. Like I was the problem. I didn't even respond to that. Shayla kept me updated though. She said Diane was calling everyone in the family trying to get sympathy, telling people that Grandma Ruthie was being dramatic, and that I was manipulating her. Manipulating an 81-year-old woman. Right. Like anyone has ever successfully manipulated Ruthie Mae Collins. That woman has a lie detector built into her brain. For about a week nothing happened. Gerald and Diane went on with their lives. They didn't apologize. They didn't call me to make peace. I think they assumed Grandma was bluffing. That she'd cool down and everything would go back to normal. They assumed wrong. On a Tuesday morning, I remember it was Tuesday because I had a staff meeting at the dental office and I was eating a granola bar in the parking lot. Grandma Ruthie called me and said, very casually like she was telling me about the weather, "Jolene, I'm putting the house in your name." I choked on my granola bar. Literally choked. I was coughing in my car like I needed medical attention. "Grandma, what?" "You heard me. That house was a gift, and gifts can be taken back when the recipient proves they don't deserve them. I spoke with my lawyer yesterday. Harold Beckman, you remember him? Nice man. His wife makes those lemon squares at church. Anyway, Harold says since the deed is still in my name, because your father never bothered to do the paperwork I told him to do 15 years ago, it's still my property. And I'm giving it to you. Do you understand what just happened? The house Gerald and Diane had been living in for years, the house they treated like it was their birthright, the house they never even officially transferred into their names because they were too lazy or too entitled to handle the paperwork. That house was about to become mine. I said, "Grandma, are you sure? They're going to lose their minds." She said, "Baby, I've already lost mine. That's why I'm doing this." Honestly, that woman is an icon. So Grandma Ruthie had Harold the lawyer draw up the papers. And then she called Gerald and told him he had 30 days to move out. 30 days. She said it just like that. "Gerald, you have 30 days to vacate the property. I suggest you start packing." Now the explosion that followed. I could hear it secondhand through Shayla, through Aunt Patrice, through half the family. Gerald was furious. Absolutely livid. He called Grandma Ruthie every name you can think of. Well, not to her face because he's not that brave, but to everyone else. Diane was crying, telling people they were being thrown out on the street like they were helpless. They're two grown adults with jobs, by the way. They weren't going to be homeless. But the drama? Oh, the drama was at an 11. Trent called me and actually yelled at me. He said, "Are you happy now? Mom and Dad have to move because of you." I said, "Trent, they have to move because of them. I didn't make them treat me like garbage at a birthday dinner. I didn't make them exclude me from a group chat. I didn't make Dad tell me I shouldn't have come to my own mother's party. They did that. All I did was tell the truth to someone who actually cares about me." He hung up on me. Do you think he had a response to that? He did not. Gerald and Diane moved out. They moved in with my dad's cousin, a guy named Owen who lives in Centerville. Owen has a finished basement and from what I heard it's actually pretty nice, but you'd think they were being banished to a dungeon based on how they described it. Diane told Aunt Patrice it was humiliating. You know what's humiliating, Diane? Being told to leave your mother's birthday dinner in front of your whole family. But I kept that thought to myself. Mostly. I might have said it to Shayla once or twice. And then on a cold November morning I moved into the house. Grandma Ruthie met me there with the keys. She'd had the locks changed because of course she did, she thinks of everything, and she walked me through every room like she was giving me a tour, even though I'd been in that house 1,000 times growing up. Brinley ran straight to what used to be Trent's old bedroom and said, "Mommy, is this my room?" And I said, "Yeah, baby. This is your room." She screamed so loud the neighbors probably thought something was wrong. He was so happy. I almost cried. Yeah, I did cry. I'm not going to lie to you, I cried. And here's the best part. No rent. No mortgage. Grandma Ruthie put the house in my name and all I had to pay was the property taxes. Same deal she gave Gerald and Diane. After years of scraping together rent money every month, stressing over every bill, I was suddenly living in a 3-bedroom house for basically nothing. Do you know what that feels like? Feels like breathing for the first time. Grandma Ruthie hugged me at the door and said, "This is what that house was always supposed to be. A home for someone who appreciates it." I held on to her for a long time. Probably too long. She patted my back and said, "All right now, don't wrinkle my good sweater." That woman. I swear. But listen, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, okay, that's great, Jolene got the house, but what about Gerald and Diane? Are they just going to accept this? Are they going to keep being awful? Is this family ever going to heal? And honestly, at that point I didn't know. Because Gerald wasn't just angry. He was planning something. And what he did next. Oh, you are not going to believe what he tried to pull. I still get heated thinking about it. But I'll tell you about that very soon, because what happened after that is the part that actually made me cry harder than I've ever cried in my life. And not for the reason you think. Just stay with me, okay? Because this isn't over yet. Alright, so I left you with Gerald planning something. And I know some of you probably guessed what he did. But trust me, you didn't guess all of it. About 2 weeks after I moved in, I came home from work and found a note taped to my front door. Yellow legal pad paper. Gerald's handwriting. It said, "This house has 40 years of memories in it. You have no right to be here. We will be pursuing legal options." Legal options. Against his own daughter. Over a house that was never legally his. I peeled that note off, stuck it on my fridge with a cupcake magnet and went on with my evening. Because Harold Beckman, Grandma's lawyer, Lemon Square wife, remember? Had made every piece of paperwork airtight. Gerald had zero legal standing and I think deep down he knew it. He just wanted to intimidate me. 3 more notes showed up that week. The man drove across town multiple times to tape paper to my door. Imagine having that kind of free time and that little self-awareness. I saved every single one though. Shayla told me to just in case. Smart girl. But then something I didn't expect happened. Diane called me. Not yelling. Not crying. She sounded exhausted. She said, "Jolene, can we talk?" I almost hung up. After everything she allowed to happen, every time she nodded along while Gerald tore me apart. Why should I give her anything? Would you have stayed on that call? Honestly, think about it. I stayed. Maybe because she's still my mom. And that's the complicated thing about family. You can be furious and still love someone. It doesn't make sense, but it's real. She said living in Owen's basement on a pull-out couch at 58 made her see things differently. She said she'd been replaying that night at Rosario's over and over and it kept getting worse. I said, "Which part? The part where Dad told me to leave or the part where you agreed?" Long silence. Then, both. That one word knocked the air out of me. I sat down on the kitchen floor while Brinley watched Bluey in the next room and I just listened. Diane told me she'd been calling Grandma Ruthie too. Multiple times. Ruthie wouldn't answer. That's Grandma's power move. If she's not ready for you, your calls go into a void. Diane said that silence hurt worse than losing the house. Because Ruthie wasn't just a mother-in-law. After Diane's own mom, Francine, passed 12 years ago, Ruthie was all she had. That got to me. I didn't want it to, but it did. I said, "Mom, words are easy. You've apologized before and nothing changed. I need to see something different." She said, "I know." Then she said something that surprised me. "Your father isn't there yet. But I'm done waiting for his permission to love you properly." 31 years I waited to hear something like that. And she said it on a random Tuesday while I sat on a kitchen floor. Life delivers the moments you dream about in the most ordinary places. Diane started coming over. Once or twice a week. She'd bring Brinley coloring books, hair clips, a stuffed giraffe that Brinley named Pasta for reasons only a 4-year-old understands. He and I would sit and talk. Not argue. She told me about her own hard childhood, about marrying Gerald because she mistook control for safety, about spending years following his lead until she forgot she was allowed to think for herself. Those conversations didn't fix everything. Trust doesn't rebuild in weeks. But she kept showing up. That mattered. Gerald, meanwhile, was still ranting at Owen's house every night until Owen finally said, "Man, let it go or find somewhere else to rant. I'm trying to eat my pork chops in peace." Bless Owen. Pork chops deserve peace. Then Gerald had a health scare. Chest pains. Owen rushed him to the ER. Turned out to be severe anxiety and high blood pressure. The doctor told him his stress was dangerous. When Diane told me, she was crying. She said, "He's scared, Jolene. I haven't seen him this scared since the day you were born and they told us the cord was around your neck." I didn't even know that happened. She said Gerald held her hand so tight she had bruises. He cried when they got me breathing. He named me Jolene because he'd been humming that song all through her pregnancy and said, "That's a name for a fighter." Fighter. The same man who told me I shouldn't have come to dinner. I don't know how those two things live inside the same person. But they do. Gerald got put on blood pressure medication. The doctor recommended therapy. And Gerald, the man who believes men don't talk about feelings, actually went. 1 session, then 2, then he kept going. 6 weeks later, Saturday afternoon, I got a knock on the door. Not a note. A knock. I opened it and Gerald was standing there. No legal pad. Hands in his jacket pockets. He looked older. Smaller. He said, "I don't know how to do this." Do what? Apologize. Nobody ever taught me. And I believed him. Because nobody did. Grandpa Earl loved his family through work, never through words. Gerald grew up where love was assumed but never spoken, and he carried that forward and made it worse. He stood on that porch and said, "I treated you different than Trent." I know I did. I don't fully understand why yet, but I'm working on it. What I said at that restaurant in front of Brinley, that was the worst thing I've ever done. I'm sorry, Jolene. He was crying. Gerald Dean Collins crying on the porch of the house he used to live in. And then Brinley, who has the best and worst timing simultaneously, ran up behind me and said, "Grandpa, want to see my room? I have a giraffe named Pasta." Gerald looked at me, asking permission with his eyes. I stepped aside and said, "Come in, Dad." She grabbed his hand and dragged him down the hall, talking about pasta and pancakes and butterflies. He looked back at me with an expression I'll carry forever. Gratitude and shame and love, all tangled together. That evening I called Grandma Ruthie and told her everything. She was quiet, then said, "Took him long enough. But better late than never." I said, "Grandma, do you think I did the right thing letting him in?" She said, "Forgiveness isn't about whether they deserve it. It's about whether you deserve to stop carrying it. And baby, you've carried it long enough." Somebody put that woman's quotes on a coffee mug. The world needs them. Things aren't perfect. Gerald still has his moments. Trent and I barely talk, though he sent Brinley a birthday card last month, which is progress. Diane comes every week. She and Brinley make cookies together and they're both terrible at it, but they laugh the entire time. Gerald comes to Sunday dinners now. He sits at the table in the house that used to be his and plays with Brinley afterward, and sometimes I catch him looking around like he's seeing the place for the first time. Last Sunday he was helping Brinley with a puzzle on the floor. He looked up at me and said, "You made this place feel more like a home than we ever did." I pointed at Grandma Ruthie's photo on the mantel and said, "Learned from the best." He smiled. A real one. Christmas, Grandma Ruthie sat in her old armchair like a queen, watched Brinley open presents, ate too much pie, fell asleep by 7:30. When she woke up she looked around at all of us. Me, Brinley, Gerald, Diane, Shayla and her boyfriend Deshawn, who is appropriately terrified of Ruthie. And she said, "Now this is what a family looks like." For the first time I agreed. So that's my story. It's messy, it's painful, and it's not wrapped up in a perfect bow. But I have my house. I have my daughter. I have a grandmother who'd go to war for me. And I have parents who are trying to be better. That's more than I ever expected. If you made it this far, thank you. If you like this, drop a like. It really does help. And if something didn't sit right or you would have handled it differently, tell me in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts. Some of you give better advice than my therapist, and she charges $160 an hour, so take that as a compliment. And if you're going through something like this, just know it can get better. It might take a Grandma Ruthie showing up in a housecoat at 9:30 at night, but it can get better. Thanks for watching, everyone. Take care of yourselves and the people who actually show up for you.